So here we're taking a look at the second edition of Nemo's War. Now this is a 1 to 4 player game, predominantly a solo game, but there is a 2 to 4 player cooperative game, as well as a 2 to 4 player competitive cooperative game. In this game, you're going to be taking on the role of Captain Nemo and having various adventures, defeating ships, managing your crew and your hull, and collecting treasures, and also inciting uprisings. The game itself is played over a series of rounds, but there is no set number of rounds. However, within each round there are 3 phases. The first phase is the event phase, and in the event phase you're just going to draw an adventure card and resolve it. Now there are 3 types that you could potentially draw as far as the standard adventures, and that is going to be a play card, which you'll immediately follow the instructions on. There's also keep cards, which you'll keep and maybe resolve later if you wish, and they might be worth points at the end of the game if you don't or do resolve them. And then will also be test, and I'll explain how to perform test a little bit later. After the event phase is resolved, you're going to go into the placement phase. In the placement phase, you're going to be rolling dice. In the beginning of the game, that's going to mean 2 white dice, and that's going to make 2 things happen. The first is it's going to determine where we're going to bring out some unrevealed ships. In this case, we need to bring 1 to the 4 and 1 to the 2. And that's going to be placed based on where these dice are. So we would put 1 here and 1 here. In addition, we're then going to take the difference of the 2 dice and gain that number of actions. So in this case, we would gain 2 actions. There's a special case where if instead you roll doubles, you'll do a lull turn. In a lull turn, you're still going to place based on the white dice that were rolled. However, you are not going to gain any actions, but potentially places with that rolled the doubles on could regain new treasure cubes, and could as well the adventure deck. After that, you're going to move into the action phase, and the action phase is where the meat of the game happens. You're going to have a list here of things that you can do. The first thing you can do is to have an adventure, and that'll allow you to draw an adventure from the deck over there and choose to do it or not. If you choose to do it and get through it, you'll also gain treasure based on it. Now that does cost 2 action points. The next thing you can do is attack. Now attack is based on where you're at, and you will have 2 different types of attacks that you can do. You can do a stalk attack, or you can do a bold attack. Now, a bold attack means that you are going to potentially be able to take out more than 1 enemy, whereas a stalk attack, you will only get to take on 1 ship, but you will get a +1 to your roll. In order to declare attack, you will use that 1 action, and then place a bold or stalking, and then if a ship hasn't been revealed, then we would reveal at that time. So here we're going to take an attack, and we're going to draw a ship from the bag. There are 2 different types of ships, such as civilian ships and then there are warships, but it'll come out and then you will need to attack it. I'll go over attacking here in just a little bit. If it's a stalk attack, as I said, you'll get an additional 1, but if it's a bold and you do defeat it, you would have the choice to continue and press on with that attack, but it could cost you more notoriety along the way. The next action you can do is to incite, and when you incite, you're going to be able to place a cube in an adjacent land area of where you're at. But when you do that, you are going to need to roll on this chart, and again, that's a test that I will explain here in a little bit. The next thing we can do is simply move for an action point to an adjacent spot. We can also rest for 2, and that allows us to try to roll and regain crew. We can repair to try to roll and repair the hull. We can refit, which will allow us to use salvage to purchase upgrades for our Nautilus, and we can search for treasure if we're in a spot that has a treasure cube available. Once you've taken all the actions you wish to do or can do, that will end that round. You are allowed to save a maximum of 1 action point from round to round. And this is important because if you at least save 1 and your next turn ends up being a lull, you would still at least have 1 action. For the search, rest, repair, refit, and insight, you need to roll against this table here, and that's going to be rolling 2d6. Depending on the action you're taking, you may be able to add to the value by exerting resources. Such as in this search, we're allowed to exert any one ship resource, and a ship resource is going to be crew or hull. To exert, you simply move this over between, and you're essentially gambling that resource. But in this case, we'd get a +3. So if we roll and we get, say, an 11, we get to add it and we get a 14. Well, anything greater than a 12 gets us a Eureka, and we actually collect 2 treasures, so we would get to draw 2 treasures from the container. When you fail and you've gambled something, if you have a 1 or 2 on there, you're going to lose that 1 resource down. But if you have higher, you're actually going to lose 2. One thing I should note here about the ones earlier that I mentioned that use 2 actions. During a lull phase, they only require 1 action to do them. Generally, any test that you do within the game, such as this card here where I need to roll to try to get a pass, you are allowed to potentially also exert resources, but the card will tell you what you are allowed and not allowed to exert towards it. Combat in the game is very similar as well in that you will be doing those rolls and you can exert crew to try to help you in it. And what you're going to be doing is you're going to be taking a look at the vessel itself. If there's any sort of damage over here, which this one doesn't have it, then that warship will get to attack you. And they will be rolling and then seeing if they roll less than that number. In this game, you always want to roll high. So if they roll less, then they're going to be doing damage to you. If on the other hand, they roll high, then they do no damage, and then you get to take a shot at them trying to defeat their defense value. And again, you can exert crew. If you destroy them, then you are allowed to put them in one of 2 tracks, either in the tonnage track, which is going to be going towards victory points that we'll explain here in a minute, or towards the salvage track. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if you put into the salvage track and you are doing a bold attack, once you do a salvage, you have to stop your attack. So you could either put it here in the ocean that you defeated them in, or put them into the salvage track. Along the way, you also have crew members that you can sacrifice or essentially throw overboard to give you an additional help. They are worth victory points at the end of the game, but sometimes you just need that extra oomph, such as the character, the chief engineer here, where if I throw him out, I do get +2 actions, but he is now lost completely to me. The notoriety track that we have up here, as it moves along, you will become more and more notorious. And once it reaches certain spots, we're going to be adding those ships to the bag, introducing more powerful warships. In addition, as we get through certain acts in the game, more warships over here will in fact come out into the bag as well. So the game has a ramping up on the difficulty as you move along. Another thing that I should mention is the endgame scoring. And the endgame scoring is based on the motive track that you chose. In the example we have laid out here, we chose Explore, which means that we have a certain degree of points based on things such as warships sunk, adventure cards, treasure, or even wonders that we have seen. The game itself ends in one of 4 ways. Either you reach the last track on your Nemo crew or hull, in which case you end in defeat. If your notoriety reaches the defeat for the particular motive track that you've chosen, such as in the Explore, if we hit this spot here at 36, we would immediately be defeated. If at any point the ocean is completely filled with tokens and we can't place another one, that would also trigger the end of the game. Now, before I explain the final way the game ends, which is how you win the game, I'm going to explain how that effect happens out here. Because whenever you need to place a ship into one of these oceans, it can spill over if it's already filled. Such as if the North Atlantic here already had 4 and we needed to place another ship, we would place it into an adjacent ocean. If we can't place it into an adjacent ocean, then instead we reveal a ship. If we can't reveal a ship, then it continues on down this path here until we can't do any of it, in which case that would trigger the end of the game. The ending that leads to victory is getting to the finale card and conducting it and completing it, in which case you have won, and now it will be important to judge your victory itself. In order to gauge how much of a victory you had, you're going to follow the scoring in the rule book and adjust it based upon your particular motive. Now, this may mean that we get victory points depending on our ships that we sunk. If they were warships, in an explore scenario, we actually lose a victory point for each warship that we sunk. However, for wonder seen, we gain 7 for each 1 wonder that we got. Because when you collect treasures, they'll also go over there and they'll have values on them that can also adjust. On the tonnage track, for each column that we have filled, we're going to go until we no longer have any more that are filled. So we need to go to the highest one that we have filled completely, and we'll get that number of victory points. You'll notice here that there are also victory points based on these that will be adjusted according to it as well. In addition, certain adventure cards that we've got will give us victory points. We'll total all that up, and that's going to determine how much of a victory that we have. Looking in the book, you'll see here that we have a level of victory. And once you check whether it's you could still lose or the defeat, but we'll check for failure, inconsequential, success, and triumph. Then you're going to go to the epilogue book and check the motive that you got and the level of victory. So let's look at the second edition of Nemo's War. Now, having never played the first edition, I can't truly say how this stacks up to the original, but having looked at pictures of the original, I can say that this is a considerable upgrade. To start off, this game was an absolute blast. From the first moments I started setting it up and playing it, I immediately drew comparisons to another game, Robinson Crusoe. This game gave me that same sort of feeling of adventure as I played along in it. With that said, the first time I played it, I played with the solo rules that are included in the box, and actually the solo rules are the base game. There is a co-op and a competitive co-op rule set that is considered a variant, and having played those as well, I can say I do prefer this game solo. It's not that the co-op rules don't work, it's just that you can tell this game was designed as a solo game, and in fact I believe the first edition was a solo game. So the game does do a decent job trying to avoid the alpha gamer and the quarterbacking, but I found that it just happens naturally in the game. The game basically breaks it into where each person takes different roles and duties that normally the solo player would take on, and just breaks it up among each player, but over time in some groups you may find that an alpha gamer may emerge. Back to the gameplay itself, I wasn't able to fully cover every rule and every aspect of the game in my overview, but I hope it gave you at least a taste. For me, this game is a whirlwind of adventure. The game feels epic, and there's no shortage of adventure cards in the deck, and you will have to play this many times over before you see every card in the game. In addition, the motive of Nemo itself really lends itself to a different play every time you go through it, and how you adapt and how you deal with those adventures is really determined based on that motive. This game has a great deal of replayability. In addition, having varying degrees of victory really helps this game out as well. Sometimes in a solo game or even a co-op game, you either have a win or lose, or you can possibly just have a beat your score sort of thing. This game kind of does both, in that you could just straight up lose, but also in victory you could still lose, or even just have a decent victory or a triumphant victory. And while if you win and you end up finding your score so means defeat, that can really bum you out a little, the hitting those triumphant victories really does feel even much more epic in that sense. There are a decent number of things that you do need to keep track of in the game, and the first time I played it, it felt a little overwhelming. You have to manage dealing with those Imperial ships coming out because you can't have them overtake the entire board, but also in sinking them, you have to be careful about managing your notoriety, as that is one way the game can defeat you. Couple that with trying to deal with wagering your crew and your ship at all odds to try to get further along, and dealing with upgrades and things like that, you really find that there's a lot to keep track of. But after a while, that starts to feel more natural, especially as you work your way into the particular strategy that you are trying to do for your motive. One other thing about the game is there is a lot of dice rolling in this game, and that by its essence means that there's a lot of randomness here. The game does do a decent job of allowing you to mitigate those rolls, both through treasure and also through wagering or betting your crew or your hull, or even Nemo's sanity itself, to try to mitigate that. But the thing is about the randomness is I think it works for the theme of this game with the adventures you're having and Nemo's general sense of adventure along the way. But if dice rolling is not really your thing, this might not be the game for you. But just keep in mind that even if it isn't your thing, you might be able to feel like you are able to control those dice, so it might not bother you as much. The artwork in the game I found absolutely fantastic. The lore within the game really is amazing here. Each of those adventure cards really gives you a lot of flavor text to really bring you into the moment. Now, if you wish, you could choose to just skip the flavor text altogether, but I really would recommend against that in this game, as it really brings the game to life. Overall, as a solo game, this game really does shine, and I highly recommend it if you're already into games such as Robinson Crusoe, because this game is going to give you a slightly simpler rule set, in my opinion, an easier setup time, and still that sense of adventure within about the same playtime. If you're getting it for the co-op mode or the co-op competitive mode, I might advise to possibly take a second look before you make your decision, as in my playgroups, the alpha gamer was a problem. I hope this has given you an idea of whether or not Nemo's War might be a good game for you. I know it is for me, and I look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.